All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining this very informative webinar. Today, we're going to talk about surviving ransomware in Australia, where we will discuss the latest legislation changes that have come to effect, and also step-by-step guide on how we should handle these type of incident, if that's to happen. So ransomware attacks in 2025 are still a main concern. Well, it's not just 2025. Ransomware attacks have always been a major concern back in the day as well. Let's look at the latest examples. Now, before we talk about latest examples, I'm pretty sure that you all are aware that the incidents that happened in the past, especially um, the Optus, Medibank, once these breaches had taken place, all their data have ended up in dark web. And the latest one is the Gina, Gina, the IVF giant, and they've been breached in February, and around close to one TB of data have been taken, especially the personal information, patient information, and some of the samples were published as well. So paying ransoms. Now, this is, is the $1 million question, like whether if and when we were breached, should we pay the ransom? So let's talk about in detail, how we going to tackle this. Now, in a report in 2024, it was revealed that 73% of businesses have chosen to pay the ransom, and also 70% are willing to pay ransom in demand. During a survey conducted. Should you pay? That's a main concern, and because there are a lot of issues, even if you do decide to pay the ransom. We'll talk about it. In our opinion, you should never pay a ransom because there is no guarantee that you will receive your data back, because once your data is breached, it's breached, and you are dealing with cyber criminals. If you do decide to pay the ransom, what's the guarantee that you receive that you will receive all your data back in clean state from these criminals? You may get lucky that your data may return back to you in a clean state, or you may not receive at all, or you still receive it, but some of the data, or maybe all of them, may end up in dark web or with other criminals. And there's a high chance that you will be attacked again through the compromised information. So in our opinion, that you should never pay a ransom, but you should have mitigation in place for these type of incident should they do happen. Now in November 29th, the Cybersecurity Act 2024 received royal assent and became law. And the one of the key components of this is that businesses that are attacked by ransomware, by cyber criminals, you are obliged to report that to the authorities. So we'll talk about that in next slides. I'm sorry. Yeah, and also just before we go back to the next one now, under the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act 2018, SOCI Act, critical infrastructure entities, telecommunications, healthcare, financial services, they still need to report cyber incidents. But we're talking about the 2024 Act, which is more onto ransomware payments. Now, in this one, it clearly defines who should report and when you should report if you have made a cyber, ransomware payment to a cyber criminal. Now, in this act, it clearly says that the businesses that are exceeding 3 million of turnover are the ones that needs to do this reporting. And also there are other criteria as well, which we will discuss. And once, let's say you've been attacked and you decided to pay the ransom and you made the payment, and once you made the payment, you from that point onwards, you have to report it within 72 hours. So that's the deadline for reporting these cyber ransomware payments if you have made that payment after an attack. Now, in this one, it will clearly, this flow chart will clearly shows you who should be reporting these type of incidents to the authorities. Now, especially the main criteria is that you must be 3 million or above in terms of revenue, and you can't be a government state body or a commonwealth body. So it's more for the private sector. Now, say if you are breached or you've been attacked by a ransomware by a cyber criminal, what to do in that event, in that type of event? I know that it'll be like a mind blowing, like say if you're attacked and if your data is encrypted, you can't work, all your key information, your IPs and everything's are encrypted and, fallen into the cyber criminals. What do you do? So we'll talk about a little bit of the steps that you need to do. Now, the first and foremost thing is that you need to have a incident response plan. Right. So when you are attacked or when you're being breached, the first thing you need to do is activate your incident response plan. So what is an incident response plan? So in an incident response plans, it clearly details and lays out who to contact, when to contact, what to do, all these type of things. It clearly lays out. So what you need to do is activate that incident response plan and just follow through. If you don't have an incident response plan, we will send you a template to get the work started. But and also we can also help you to get that started. So once you activated the incident response plan, then you can follow through and, as per the legislations and regulations, then you can start working on how to mitigate the incident. Now, here's a, reporting and compliance requirement that you need to adhere if you have an incident at your workplace. So you need to notify to the information commission, also information commissioner. Now, keep in mind this is more for incidents, right? So we'll talk about how the we talked about how the payments. If you made a payment to a cyber criminal, what you need to do. So you need to report that within 72 hours. And this is also if you've been attacked by a cyber criminal, that you need to report that to the Australian Information Commissioner under the Privacy Act of 1988. Now, this one is not mandatory for most of the businesses. As I mentioned it before, this is something that falls under the SOCI, the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. And this is more relevant to the critical infrastructure, the reporting part of it, if you're breached. I'm not talking about the cyber payments, right? So if you made a ransomware payment, then of course that applies to businesses that are 3 million or above. And you should be reporting that to the authorities within this first 72 hours. And coming back to the reporting of ransomware payments, now this is part of the Cybersecurity Act 2024, and this will come into effect on May 30th, 2025. Just want to highlight that. So you are already well prepared now. Should this type of incident happens, that you need to report it from May 30th, 2025. Please note that the act is already in force and it's a law, and it became a law on 29th of November last year. So now we've talked about the ransomware, the legislation changes, the Cybersecurity Act 2024. What are the key areas of Cybersecurity Act 2024? So with this one, now we'll talk about the legislations, policies, incident response plans. Now, how do we prevent this in the first place? As they say, prevention is better than cure. So we must, as businesses, we must take the step to prevent it, because coming back from a cyber attack is not easy. It's painful, time consuming, revenue loss. I mean, some companies can't come back at all. I know I can talk about it with experiences I had in my previous roles. If you don't have proper steps, proper methods that you've taken to protect your environment, coming back from a cyber attack is sometimes next to impossible, right? So with this, I'm going to hand over the floor to David, who is our SME on cybersecurity and the product team. So he's from Acronis, our partner, and we are Acronis accredited gold certified partner. So I will hand over the floor to David, and David will take you through how we can prevent these type of incident, ever from happening. David, floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thanks, Samida. Really appreciate that. Let me share my screen here, and hopefully, if the as you can probably see, I'm using Mac. So if the ghost of Steve Jobs is smiling, this should all be working fine. You should see my screen. Okay. So again, thanks Samida for giving us that context around the changes in the Privacy Act and the changes in the cybersecurity legislative firmament that we're currently going through in Australia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, first of all, I'm the Senior Solutions Engineer here at Acronis for Australia, New Zealand. I am not a lawyer. So absolutely putting the big caveat on this. When it comes to compliance with legal frameworks, absolutely speak to a legal professional. At best, I'm an enthusiastic amateur when it comes to these things, but I am definitely not a legal professional. So just bear that in mind. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention is I'm going to show you a couple of slides. And I hope you've been to Specsavers because they will get progressively denser and denser with a lot more information on them. So this is probably a good moment to just reach into your desk and take the old reading glasses out. I've certainly put them on because I know what's coming up. And that's just to let you be aware of that. And that's kind of to show you a little bit of simplicity to complexity and hopefully come back. So first up, there's that really interesting curse that we're all aware of, is like, make you live in interesting times. And basically what that means is, when things are quiet and peaceful, you're going to have an easy life. But interesting times means there's a lot of change going on in the environment, and that is what we're going through in Australia at the moment, in the legislative frameworks that we're seeing around privacy and cybersecurity. The reasons for this is possibly Australia did begin to lag a little bit compared to maybe domains like the European Union with the GDPR. And what was then recognised by the federal government was, okay, we need to change this. We need to get on the front foot with cybersecurity and with privacy. So it was with that in mind what the federal government did about three and a half years ago. They came up with the Australian Cybersecurity Strategy 2023 to 2030, so basically laid out a 7-year strategy. And the 7-year strategy was then segmented into 3 horizons: Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. And what these were, I'll mention just Horizon 1, because we're coming to the end of Horizon 1 and going into the start of Horizon 2. So that's basically how they're segmenting this long-term program. One of the first things that they wanted to address was protecting the vulnerable in the community. So that's great. What this meant doing was tightening up privacy laws. There was also this was also what was driving things like, you may remember a lot of conversation recently about social media and juvenile access to that. When you look at the cybersecurity framework, the 7-year framework, it all makes sense. It's like, okay, these legislations are not coming out of thin air. This is actually planned. It's according to a certain structure. So if you want to get ahead of the curve and see what's coming down the road, it is absolutely worth having a quick, at least a scan through that policy document. Now, Samida's already said the O word. The O word informed a lot of what went into the cybersecurity policy in Australia. The O word is Optus, right? Bad luck when your company becomes associated with something like this. But basically what had happened was previously a lot of the direction of travel was to leave a lot of cybersecurity and privacy was largely being left to the market. But then with the Optus breach, technically what happened with Optus was nothing new. It was nothing to write home about. It was actually pretty run-of-the-mill, an unprotected open API. Nothing particularly sophisticated about it. However, it was the impact that was the difference. So they impacted up to 11 million individuals. Now, where that then feeds into the government policy, which then feeds into everything else, is it was more about resilience. Because what happened, the government very quickly realised when all of these records got breached from the Optus data leak, they needed very quickly to issue driver's licenses, and the driver's licenses are devolved to each of the states. That's the state level, and different states had different ways of approaching this. Western Australia, great, no problem. Just walk in, get a new driver's license, off you go, happy, sorted. Queensland and Victoria was not quite as easy, but there was provision to do that. New South Wales was a nightmare. New South Wales was set up in such a way that you got a driving license number and that was yours for life, and there was really no provision to do this en masse. So that then became a resilience problem. So it's with that sort of lens that the government's looking at, saying, okay, how do we recover from events like this? And the best way to recover, as Samira said, the best way to recover from something is for it not to happen in the first place. Basically, it's like cyber penicillin. That's still your best friend. So, at a simple level, first thing I'm going to say, this is nice and simple. 4 boxes. If you're looking at cleanliness, what we are looking at. Let me get the. Let me change this to a laser pointer so you don't see my mouse just bouncing around there. Oh, no, that's not behaving itself. It's apologies for that. Right, well, forget the laser pointer. Steve Jobs isn't smiling at us after all. So what we'll do, right? These 4 simple points. If I was to say, what does good hygiene look like? Yes, stuff like train your employees. People are the weakest link. That's terrible to say that, but it is true. What you'll find with any kind of cyber attack, they are going to, as quickly as possible, try and attack or reach the employee, because what happens is they have the ability to think independently and click on things and approve things and type in passwords and what have you. So cyber awareness training is probably level 1 before you even let them near the computer. That sort of makes sure they know what they're doing. So most people are kind of aware of this, but what's happening as we move forward in the legislative frameworks. What they're basically beginning to do is say, right, if there was a breach, you need to be able to demonstrate, did you follow good practice or a certain framework in order to protect individuals' data. So part of that is, have you created a cybersecurity culture? So cyber train is low-hanging fruit awareness training, because you can document and say, yes, that person completed that course on that date and we've got a check mark, done. Okay, they passed the quiz and they got the little rosette in a PDF. Fantastic. So that's absolutely, that's an easy win. Moving away from people, keeping systems updated. There's a trick to this. Number 1, do not rely on people to do it. Automate this. If there's one word that you want to do for cyber hygiene, it's automation. People are very good at creative tasks. They're good at telling stories. They're good at picking, wallpaper. Anything creative, humans are good at that. Anything repetitive, they are very bad at that. So hence, software updates, automate it. Absolutely automate that. This is absolutely acting as if it's haunted, this presentation, but I'll keep an eye on it. I'll keep a firm hand on it because I'm a human being and I've got my mouse here. So other things, as I say, critical to keep under control. I think most people have got this in 2025. Access credentials. So we are talking multi-factor authentication, using authenticator app and so on and so forth. Other good hygiene practices, again, the idea of applying least privilege. Now, least privilege is actually kind of touches as well a little bit with another one of the principles that's coming up with that we're seeing in privacy legislation. Now, the current legislation that has been enacted and implemented, the 2024 Act, that's step 1. There is, as I say, when you look at that the cybersecurity strategy, there is more to come. And again, reaffirming, I am not a lawyer, but there are certain principles which are actually, they've got conflict built in. One of these principles is, I was mentioning access for juveniles to social media. What that does is that requires you to actually track who is a juvenile and what are they accessing. But there is also a conflicting requisite within the legislation that's coming that basically says you should be able to transact anonymously. That means that you should be able to buy something online, go online, buy a mouse, and you don't have to give your details. It's a bit equivalent, think of it like a digital equivalent of paying with cash. That's the idea. You do not have to give up your details, and you should be able to transact. So this is one of the other principles that are going to be built into the legislation moving forward over the coming years. There's an inherent conflict between these two things. How do I keep an identified group safe, meanwhile keeping everyone anonymous? There's no easy answer. This is what part of we're going to see that then shaking out. How's the legislation going to handle that? Actually, just another thing about legislation, quite interestingly, about the 2024 Act. There was another thing happened. I was saying in Australia we've got this sort of flurry of legislation that we're trying to catch up with the likes of the EU. Because there is an election coming up, what you find, and this is normal for every parliamentary cycle, towards the end of a parliamentary session, you tend to see a lot more legislation gets passed. It's like, just go get that passed. Let's get this legislative diet cleared, get it onto the statute books ahead of the election. So we saw a flurry of this. And part of what happened there was there was legislation which was around it was framed as freedom of speech again, and truthfulness in social media. Can you tell basically, is what you're saying on social media, for example, is it true? That then became a political hot potato. So because of that, the legislation got not canned. It was delayed, shall we say. It was sent back for rewriting, and because it was a political hot potato coming up to the election, so no government's going to touch that. In that legislation as well was something which related to what's called inauthentic communication. Inauthentic communication is botnets and bot farms, which is basically saying, I'll take something that I know is not true. This cable here beside me, I'm going to say it's black. I don't know if you can see it in my background, but if I say this is a black cable, and then I use 1,000 bots to then amplify that message, the message then gets out to people who've never actually seen a cable. They think I've got a black cable. That's the idea. Is legislation is going to be put in place which will prevent and certainly limit the use of bots. So that's kind of coming. So what we're seeing is, so there's been a large flurry of legislation that kind of happened towards the end of a parliamentary cycle. That's normal. So that was just a little aside when I was talking about MFA. And lastly, implement multi-layered security. So what this basically means is, if I was to put this into a simple phrase, it is hope for the best, plan for the worst. So as Samira was saying, this is your incident response plan. Your incident response plan would be, what happens if something goes wrong? Do I have the ability to contain the breach? Do I then have to respond? Is the ransomware, or has data been leaked? Who's responsible for knowing this? And does this need to be notified, etc., etc. So the idea is, as I say, you plan for multi-layered security. And what multi-layered security looks like, and this is a deck, this is a slide that I actually use quite a lot, is this concept here, defense in depth. Now, what defense in depth is exactly that of try and prevent bad things happening, but just be prepared for it. Your defenses and your shields breaking, i.e. being circumvented or just not working. So defense in depth is, right, I'm going to give everyone security access security awareness training. Great, we've all got it, and we've all got the check mark. We all know what phishing emails is. However, even at our best, even cybersecurity professionals who are at the top of their game will make mistakes because we're human. So at some point, just assume someone's going to click on something they're not supposed to. So your next step is saying, okay, what do we do to eliminate that? How do we stop that? How do we stop something like that link in an email even being presented? So that's something like email security you would use there. Great. Then the next thing is say, well, what happens if I've got an email security platform? It's read, so this is what I'm talking about here, an email security platform. So I've got an educated employee, but maybe they weren't on top of their game. They were distracted. They were picking wallpaper, whatever it was they were doing. An email was delivered to them. They clicked on the link. So what happens next? That's where you want something like URL blocking on an endpoint. This is where you're. This is very much driven by your antivirus, anti-malware agent. Should have a URL filter on it. Ours does. Acronis one does. A URL filter to stop a malicious link actually being loaded. And what this relates to. What this relates to is the concept of the Essential 8 framework. Now, the Essential 8 framework is a very important framework in Australia. It is the one that's managed by the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. And what that does is it's nice and simple. It's 8 essential mitigation strategies. But however, they're not comprehensive. Simple, comprehensive, they are absolutely, they're antithesis of each other. They are simple, so they're easy to follow. But if you only implemented Essential 8, you'll get compromised by the end of the week, because it doesn't mention things like antivirus or email security or all of that. It misses massive areas. But what the Essential 8 is very good at is starting you on a security journey. Now, another thing that Essential 8 does very well is this concept of maturity levels, maturity level 1, 2, and 3. There is a maturity level 0, but we don't talk about that because it's not really, it basically means you've done nothing. So maturity levels 1, 2, and 3 essentially relate to how sophisticated is my attacker. You know, is it some high school kid that's just playing around in PowerShell? Is it an organized crime syndicate, or is it a foreign intelligence agency? That sort of thing. That's the three extreme examples of how sophisticated your adversary is. Now, what happens is these maturity levels, they kind of map against, you know, are they using standard tools or are they using bespoke tools and techniques? And a good example of this, because I'm just mentioning this about email security, a good example of this is maturity level 1 would be have an email security platform that will screen for phishing emails, right? That's very, very powerful. About 90%, north of 80%, round about 90%, give or take, 90% of cyber attacks, the initial vector is through email. That's how they get to end users, is through email. So what happens is, if you've got an effective email security filter, that's going to say, right, okay, there's a phishing email in there, quarantine it, never gets delivered. That's the safest thing. However, a sophisticated adversary is expecting you to do that. A sophisticated adversary is then going to use time as a weapon against you. So what they're going to do is they're going to send you an email with a URL in it. URL goes to website. Website's perfectly clean, perfectly legit. So that gets passed and that gets delivered. However, they wait a couple of hours and then they put the malware on the website. Your email security filter is not going to find that because it's reading incoming emails. So the next step is we say, so that's gone from maturity level 1, which was, you know, just send a malicious email. Maturity level 2 is they send you a clean email that then becomes malicious later, closer to the time the person's actually going to click on it. So that's the maturity level 2. The maturity level 2, what you would then do is say, and this is where defense in depth comes in, and say, okay, how do I protect myself? A, at the point of delivery, and B, at the point of interaction. The point of interaction is when someone actually clicks on the link. And so that's what the concept of defense in depth is. And defense in depth, if I was to summarize this into a way that my granny could understand, I would say this. Cybersecurity is like getting married, and it's like taking a dog for a walk or baking a cake. It's exactly the same in this fundamental way. And the fundamental way is this. It falls into 3 stages. Before, during, after. You can apply that to almost anything in life. So yeah, getting married, getting engaged, meeting someone, getting engaged, getting married. There's a before, during, after. Exactly the same as cybersecurity. So what cybersecurity does is, as I say, the before phase is good hygiene. You know, I was mentioning about patch your operating systems. That's an essential 8. Patch your applications. That's an essential 8 as well. So do that. That's what we take with the defense in depth strategy. So you do your before. Security awareness training. You do that before. During, what during looks like is an email shield to stop, you know, email security to stop malicious URLs being sent to people. An antivirus product, anti-malware product, which will then prevent an attack in progress. There is then the after phase stuff like endpoint detection response, which basically said a machine has been attacked. What vector did they use? How did they get in there? What vulnerabilities have they used? Are these vulnerabilities present anywhere else? How can I prevent this happening again? So essentially becomes a feedback loop. Also in the after phases, things like backup recovery and disaster recovery. So that's the idea, as I say, of defense in depth. And defense in depth ties in with the legislative framework. And importantly in this way. So like I say, we're at the initial stages where there has been, under the privacy legislation, we have to report ransomware within 72 hours and so on. What is coming? The Information Commissioner has now got the powers to compel certain activities. So that could be stuff like, are you securing identifiable information, personal information? Are you securing these? And the way that that's going to shake out most likely is going to be using frameworks and essentially is the one from the Signals Directorate. It is from the federal government. That is probably going to be the framework that a lot of this legislation is going to be based on. So I'll give you an example. Has anyone ever been to a pub in the UK? You know, I certainly have been to my fair share. Quite often you'll see up on the wall, comic effect now, you'll see up on the wall, rules of the house. And the rules of the house will be stuff like, you know, you have to tie your horse up outside. You can't bring the horse into the bar. You have to sheath your sword and your cudgel. All of this kind of thing. And you're not allowed. You know, singers and jugglers are not allowed in the public bar in these hours. That kind of thing. Comic effect. But the point of it is this: if you make legislation prescriptive for what is the current environment, that's going to age very quickly. So, for example, if we were looking at cybersecurity and personal information, protection of information 100 years ago, you would have enacted a law that would have said something like this, that telegraph operators must wear a uniform, and anyone who's not a telegraph operator is not allowed to wear a uniform. And that's it. You've got this robust security in place that you can trust someone in a telegraph uniform, because it's illegal for anyone else to wear it. Obviously, by now that would be outdated because it was too prescriptive and it was related to the technology of the time. So do not expect legislation to refer to explicitly to particular technologies in general. That's going to be past the frameworks, and this is what we're already beginning to see with the Office of the Privacy, the Information Commissioner. What they're able to do is then compel you to say, right, you are keeping personal identifiable information. We are going to compel you to follow things like essentially where you have patch management in place, maybe email security. You have taken reasonable steps to protect that data, and you have taken reasonable steps that when a breach occurs, how you then respond to it, and that's your response plan. That's roughly, and again, not a lawyer, that's roughly the sort of shape that the legislation is taking with as relating to the technologies themselves. Now, as I say, you've already got your glasses on. I hope this is sorry. This is not too dense. This one's okay. Where I'm kind of getting to as well about frameworks is now essentially has its strengths and its weaknesses. Its strength, probably its biggest weakness is it does not really address modern workspace particularly well. It is aimed at kind of older technology, and it is heavily skewed towards Microsoft. It's not so great in the age of modern workspace, really. But that's okay. What its principal objective was to just get people started in the journey, thinking about doing something, basically make it a small enough digestible slice that people take it seriously. And in that regard, it's worked fantastically. It's actually fulfilled its objective. So we'll probably see essentially evolve a little bit, and these frameworks from the government will, shall we say, improve and become more relevant, more robust. So what I'm going to mention here is the NIST framework. The reason I'm mentioning NIST, there are, in my personal experience, there is very few people in the Australian market who are putting a hand in the heart and say, yeah, I'm following NIST. They're not doing it. They're using essentially, there are others, SMB 1001, CIS. There are a few others that are being used. Essentially, it's probably ahead by a country mile. If I was to use a Melbourne Cup metaphor, it's ahead by about 3 furlongs. NIST, but however, the reason I'm mentioning NIST is kind of the first principle. That's the granddaddy framework on which a lot of the others are kind of based and borrow from. So what this essentially does is a good way to then think of that defense in depth. I find it a little bit complicated to work with. That's why I like before, during, after. But this is the basis of good. What good cybersecurity looks like is using this. And if personally here at Acronis, we have deliberately aligned our product with the NIST framework for that reason, which makes it very easy to translate to Essentialate or SMB 1001 or whatever, CIS, whatever you're using. Because if you align with NIST, that's like basically speaking Latin. Your German, your French, and your Spanish will come easily to you. So this is the Latin of security frameworks. So, like I say, this is one where I do expect you. This is not a false alarm. Do put your reading glasses on for this. So what we're kind of going for here is Defense in depth. This is deliberately complicated, right? I don't expect you to remember this. I don't expect you to even read it. But the idea is this does align to kind of before, during, after, and what we can do is relate this. Is like, okay, this is what prevention looks like. This is what cure looks like, and this is what remediation looks like. Was it medical rehabilitation? Yeah, that's probably a more medical term to put it. This is what rehabilitation looks like, and it's that sort of thing. So it's building up this. It's taking that complexity but applying it in a simple way, and that's how you then find compliance with the new legislation as is enacted now and is coming. It will become second nature to you. It will become a much easier thing. So my kind of takeaway from this is, as I say, this actually boils down to a very simple way we do this. It's we use a single platform to do all of this sort of cybersecurity management, and because of that, there's you're kind of well positioned for the current legislative situation and also future proofing. And if I was to just kind of wrap up on one last thing, is again, take that complexity, simplicity will mean don't have nightmares. Security is serious, privacy is serious, and certainly legislatively we're seeing that more and more. But just because it's serious doesn't mean it should overwhelm you. That's what we're here for. We live and breathe this stuff. So by all means, NSN Infotech and Sumida, reach out to Smeda and NSN Infotech and as your trusted advisors on this journey. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Sumida, let me hand back to you. Hopefully that was helpful or useful. Sumida, you're on mute, mate.
All right, am I audible now?
Yes, gotcha now.
Yeah, okay. David, yes, and thank you very much for that insightful discussion. And it's truly mind-blowing. I mean, with the new technologies like AI, I know this AI is one of the biggest topics um, now, but cyber criminals also use AI to, you know, attack the businesses. So it's next level. So having the prevention in place is the most important thing. And also, as David mentioned, human are the weakest link. So if your staff is not aware what's happening in the cyberspace, there's a high chance that your business will become a victim of a cyber criminal. I'll give you an example. I mean, let's say you have firewalls, endpoint security, I mean, all the best technologies that you can provide to protect the business. But what happens if a mail comes in and a user executes that Trojan within the business? And that's it. Like, it will bypass all your security and spread the whole virus and ransomware, across the business and encrypt all your data. I know I've experienced this firsthand. That's why I'm able to share these type of scenarios with you. And the other thing is that, especially the small businesses, they think, oh, this is too expensive to, put the prevention measures in place. But keep in mind that coming back from a ransomware attack is 10 times the cost of the prevention cost. And also it's super duper painful. And some businesses like don't come back at all. Like, that's the end of it. So I highly encourage you to look at these type of mechanisms that you can implement within your workplace, because that will save the business for you. The problem with ransomware is there's no guarantee that you will, like, say if you do decide to, I'm just touching base back on the ransomware payments, like even if you do decide to make that payment and just get the data back, there's no guarantee that you will get it. So I've seen, in some incidents where you make the payment and they disappear. and you lose the money, you lose the data, you lose the business. So I highly encourage you to have these methods in place to prevent rather than trying to recover. Um, and this brings back to the idea that prevention is better than cure. And also, I would want you to keep in mind Cybersecurity Act 2024, Security of Critical Infrastructure Act 2018, SOCI Act, and Notifiable Data Breach Scheme of the Privacy Act 1988. So these are all, common knowledge, is available online. You can go online and read about it more and update yourselves. And also you could, um, take decisions based on what you read on these acts and legislations. And also keep in mind about the authorities that you need to report if there's an incident. And of course, if you have the incident response plans, these will be included within the response plans, as David mentioned. And you must be wondering who I am. So my name is Sumedha, and I've been in the industry for around 30 years now, in the IT industry, and I have experience in disaster recovery, cybersecurity, and these areas. And I'm the director at NSN Infotech. We are a managed service provider. We are based in Bella Vista, Western Sydney, and we are a gold certified partner with Acronis. We provide solutions using Acronis products, especially the areas that David mentioned. Let's go to the next slide. And well, obviously, every good thing has come to an end. So this event has come to an end. Now, please scan this QR code and connect with the team so that you could get the help that you require, or to prevent and put these controls in your workplace. And also, as part of this event, you'll be receiving a fact sheet and an ebook. It's a sample template of incident response plans. And also, if you would like us to come in and have a look at your BCP, business continuity and disaster recovery planning, we can help you with, which is a $2,000 exercise. But as a special promotion, we're going to give it to you free of cost. So please reach out and make the most of this offer. And once again, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this one. And I hope this will be an informative sessions for you in your cybersecurity journey. And once again, thank you very much. And thank you very much for David and the team for sharing wonderful examples and, about cybersecurity in general. You all have a wonderful day, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.